All right, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating four-part theological series, The Mystical Union by Brother June Makapobre. We're going to zero in on his opening episodes, specifically focusing on the God of the future. And as you'll see in the text and quotes we've pulled for this explainer, the words he uses are meticulously crafted. They literally reshape how we view time, spirituality, and our own internal transformation.
Right out of the gate, the series challenges us to completely rethink time. It hits us with this profound question that targets something we all do, our absolute obsession with past mistakes. We spend so much of our lives anchored to our history, kind of calculating our worth by what we've already done. But the speaker introduces this huge paradigm shift. What if the Creator isn't just sitting back there in our history?
What if instead he is already waiting in our tomorrow? This right here sets up the core thesis of the whole series. God isn't just the Ancient of Days, he's the architect of what is yet to come. By framing the divine as the God of the future, the argument is that all that anxiety and fear of the unknown can just dissolve. Why? Because believers are encouraged to see themselves as walking right into a destiny that is actually already secured.
So, the source completely redefines how we look at our timeline. Think about the era of creation, like back in Genesis. Everything was complete, right? But then, look ahead to the era of Revelation, the future, where everything is absolutely perfect. No more crying, no more death. The speaker argues that believers aren't just moving in these endless, exhausting circles. We're actually walking a straight line toward that perfect destiny. And the really crucial part, this current era we're in right now is where we get to partially experience those perfect future realities today.
But, of course, something blocks us from experiencing those realities right now, right? To understand what that is, we have to look at the human condition. And I love this detail. The speaker notes he actually dug through five different systematic theologies, trying to find a definition of sin or harmatology that truly resonated and explained this disconnect.
And the breakthrough finally comes from this quote by theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher. It beautifully strips away all that complex, layered religious guilt that defines our failings so simply. It's just a lack of divine consciousness. According to the source, when you give in to anger or make a massive mistake, it's not some deeply complicated failure. It's simply because you've lost the active awareness that a merciful Creator is standing right there with you. Now, let's shift gears to a really compelling analogy the series uses in part 2. The speaker wants to explain the incarnation. The divine becoming human, but without getting bogged down in super dense academic language. So he uses a parable about a naturalist, and it is incredibly effective. The story goes like this. There's this naturalist who deeply, deeply loved the ants in his garden. He was their caretaker. He literally did everything he could to protect them, to sustain them, and to make sure they had absolutely everything they needed to survive. He provided for them completely. But as you might guess, despite all his meticulous care, the ants just couldn't comprehend him. To them, he was this massive, terrifying, invisible force. So they were constantly defensive, always agitated, and ready to attack and bite him the second he stepped near their colony. They were completely blind to his good intentions.
So, the naturalist realizes something profound. To bridge this massive gap in understanding, to truly show them his benevolent nature, he can't just keep dropping food from the sky. No, he would literally have to become an ant himself. He had to enter their world, down at their scale, just to communicate.
And this perfectly captures the concept of Emmanuel, which means God with us. It explains the incarnation not as some distant deity handing down a list of rules, but as this unbroken, historical desire, stretching all the way back to the Garden of Eden, to simply say, I want to be with you.
Which brings us to a universal human frustration. We've all been here, right? Feeling this agonizing desire to change that just feels completely impossible. We want to be better. We want to be more patient, more giving, but we constantly hit a brick wall.
The series draws a really stark contrast here. It argues that human methods alone simply aren't enough to alter our fundamental nature. You can throw religion at the problem, you can throw education at it, or even massive amounts of wealth, but they fail to change a person's core character. The speaker posits that only the literal, active presence of God succeeds in doing the heavy lifting of true internal change.
To really hammer this home, the speaker points to a powerful biblical proverb, showing just how deeply ingrained our nature truly is. Just like you can't scrub the spots off a leopard with human science or willpower, you can't scrub away deeply rooted character flaws on your own. It's just not happening.
Ultimately, true character transformation is not a DIY self-help project. It's framed here as a literal miracle. We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of a person that is completely beyond human willpower, beyond scientific intervention, and beyond any earthly method. It absolutely requires an outside divine force.
So how does it happen? The speaker argues that change occurs when we taste the future. The series explains that individuals can literally experience or taste future heavenly realities during their present earthly trials. You might be going through the hardest time of your life, but suddenly you experience this unexplainable peace or provision. That, the source says, is tasting the perfection of the future, right here, right now, in the present.
Now, walking in this divine presence isn't just some passive ride where you kick back and do nothing. As we move into the actual mystical union part of the explainer, the source is crystal clear. It requires a mutual exchange. Kind of like a healthy marriage, there are demands. It requires trusting God entirely, remaining fiercely faithful through trials, becoming deeply prayerful, and actually surrendering your own personal demands to align with a higher will.
And when this union truly occurs, the series explains there's a massive paradigm shift in how a person operates. The old mentality is driven entirely by self-interest. It's the worldly principle of getting, consuming, and possessing. But the new mentality, which is forged in this mystical union, is driven entirely by serving others and by giving. Your joy shifts from worldly pleasures to the profound fulfillment of actually being useful to others.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world. The speaker grounds this whole theological concept with a stark cultural observation. Even when facing harsh societal realities, like the declining poverty line in the Philippines, which he references directly, true believers maintain incredibly high spiritual fulfillment. Their joy and gratitude remain completely independent of their low worldly economic status, simply because their sustenance comes from a divine economy that never, ever goes bankrupt.
To describe this divine economy, the speaker uses such a beautiful analogy. He compares God's inexhaustible grace to the ocean. Think about it. Humanity has scarred the oceans with cyanide fishing, dynamite, oil spills, yet the ocean remains incredibly resilient. It continues to provide fish, it continues to sustain life, despite our destructive hands. The source says the divine presence is exactly like that, endless and unstoppably generous.
This leads us to the ultimate climax of the series, the mystical union itself. Becoming a new creation isn't reserved for some distant afterlife or purgatory. The transformation is happening right now. The old mentality is gone today. The new mentality has arrived today. You literally become suited for a heavenly home while your feet are still planted firmly on this earth.
To wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with a final thought that really summarizes this entire journey. If all true transformation, if a completely new mentality and an unshakable peace comes not from our exhausting human efforts, but simply from walking in the active presence of the God of the future, well, how does that change the way you face your own tomorrow? It's an absolutely fascinating framework to rethink our lives, and we hope this breakdown has brought these concepts into sharp focus for you.